Don't try to do it yourself, for sure. It is very much a team sport. Even though you're a team of one, you're going to work across all these other teams, and they all just need to be kind of part of your team, unofficially, right? So do that by bridging the gap.
Hello, everyone. Welcome.
Hello.
Good afternoon. Good morning. I am Larissa DiStefano, Director of Marketing at SalesHood, and I am thrilled to be joined by Bobbi Jo Frazier, Director of Revenue Enablement at ActivTrak. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. We're super excited about this topic, how to thrive as a sales enablement or an enablement team of one.
Just a quick little walkthrough of what to expect. We've kind of done some of the intro, get through that. And then there's really going to be five key areas that I'm going to touch on, how to thrive as an enablement team of one. Then kind of review the key takeaways and answer any questions, but feel free to shoot those questions all throughout. You don't have to save them for the end. I'd love for this to be as interactive as possible. So as she said, my name is Bobbi Jo Frazier. I'm Director of Revenue Enablement here at ActivTrak. I am in Austin, Texas right now. So lovely to see people joining us from all over. And I wanted to start with a quick little poll just to kind of get a vibe of the audience that we have and what is the size of your current enablement team.
All right, so the poll is launched. We're getting lots of answers.
Awesome.
We're going to give it about 20 or 30 seconds. Where do you think we're going to end up, Bobbi Jo?
Well, I think due to the title, we might get a good amount of solo folks here.
Yeah.
But I've been surprised by this sometimes. So maybe somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, we'll see. All right, 80% of you have voted. 10 more seconds to get your vote in and tell us the size of your enablement team. Okay. All right. Numbers are still changing. Okay. All right, here we go. I'm going to end the poll and then share the results so everyone can see them. And here we go. Lots of enablement teams of one.
Awesome.
Yeah. So
that's my people.
You're in the right place. You are in the right place.
Perfect. Cool. Okay. So I'm going to ask one more question, one more poll. This one's a little trickier. And this is, who feels like they're a strategic partner versus an order taker from sales or product or maybe even marketing, whoever you work with closely? So do you feel like you're a strategic partner, or do you feel like you're oftentimes more of just an order taker? This is, tree of trust. It's a safe space. We can be honest.
Someone put in both in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I probably should have put that as a third option.
Yeah.
Foresight.
How would you answer the question?
I think that both. I would say if you asked me this question last year, it would be order taker for sure. And now that I've had some time to kind of get a hold of things and do that, I'm definitely leaning much more to being that strategic partner and trying to keep that as my goal, even when times that I do feel like an order taker sometimes, right? Yeah. And hey, there's sales or product or whoever is always going to ask for things, or hey, we need to get this out, or hey, sales needs this. Totally. There's always going to be some ad hoc requests.
Yeah.
So it's not okay. It's not a bad thing. It's totally okay if that happens all the time. But feeling like that all the time, I don't know how sustainable that would become at some point.
Yeah.
So
yeah, for sure.
So I'm interested to see where we land.
All right.
Other than both. Okay, we've got some strategic partners here. That's amazing. And we got some order takers too. And hey, that's totally okay. But we're gonna help get you to where you're starting to feel like you're more of a strategic partner. So that is the perfect segue into the first key element here, and that's being strategic in your vision, right? And what does that mean? So when I think of being strategic in your vision and what does being strategic mean to me, I specifically think of strategic engagement. And to me, that means aligning with your stakeholders by speaking their language, right? Prioritizing their goals, their why. And then how does your plan encompass that? So specifically when I'm talking about, hey, let's speak their language, think about who your audience is, right? So you're speaking with your executives. You're going to want to talk to them about what's important to them, right? Go to market strategy, scaling, what are their goals? What are their expectations? Then when you're talking to, I refer to these as my collaboration teams, but I generally mean like product marketing operations. You know, what's important to them, right? Content adoption is always huge for marketing. Hey, is sales using our content? Are people using our content? Messaging alignment as well. Operations, it's all about process optimization. How do we make these processes for these teams better? And then what they always want is that feedback loop, right? What are people saying? How is this landing? So when you're talking to them, speaking their language so they feel comfortable. And then when you're working with your sales teams, whether it's your sales managers, sales leaders, your sellers, your reps, speaking their language, and that's going to be like, hey, what are their needs? What do they need to do their jobs better? What do they need to succeed? What are their goals? What are their motivations, right? I always ask the question when we have a new seller, like, hey, you know, what motivates you outside of, hey, I just want to make a bunch of money? And that's a totally perfect answer. Like, absolutely, who doesn't, right? But like, what does that money get you, right? And let's think about the why. And it just gives them a little more like fire, right? Like, yes, I do want to buy a house for my family, or I want to be able to go on this vacation, or whatever the case, right? And then having conversations with them that are, you know, around performance and how to improve that. So what does all of this mean? When you're having these conversations and you're speaking their language, one, you're going to sound like to them like, hey, this is someone I can trust, that understands what's important to me, right? You're not going to your executive and going, man, this piece of content that I'm getting is just really no good, and I wish I could get something better. They're like, I don't care about that, you know? So it helps to them, you know, trust what you're saying, trust what you're doing, understand that like, hey, you know what we care about, right? And then you can take all of that, build your programs, but keep those you know, priorities in mind. How do we hit these priorities for the sales team? How do we get our collaboration teams hitting their goals with what we're trying to do together? And then ultimately, how does that go all the way up to that go-to-market strategy, right? Now, how do we do that, right? How do we have those conversations? I think if you always lead with the WIFM, what's in it for me, on both sides of the table, it makes these conversations and this working together and being strategic together and engaging a lot smoother, right? So what does that look like? The trade-off with your exec team, you what's in it for you? You need funding, you want authority, they want results, they want growth. That's your trade-off, right? So what's in it for them? What's in it for you? And then with your collaboration teams, you want the content, you want the expertise, they want adoption, and they want feedback. They want that feedback loop of what's working, whether in the market or with the product or so on and so forth. And then with your teams, your sales teams that you're supporting, you want all of their productivity and then to put forth their full effort. And then they need the services and the coaching that you're providing to them. So if you're always leading with that, what's in it for me on both sides, and you know, framing the asks around that, it gets you pretty far. Any questions on this one that we want to pause for?
Yeah, we got a lot of comments, and Jay Hoffman very correctly pointed out that what's in it for me is the first rule of how to win friends and influence people. Classic,
correct.
book by Dale Carnegie. Yes, and also notes that the challenge is in identifying the actual goals and weeding out what they think they need to do to achieve them. Do you want to comment on that? I think that's a really interesting nuance.
So can you repeat it? I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. The challenge is in identifying the actual goals and weeding out what they think they need to do to achieve them.
Yeah. Great question. And a good kind of way to layer on top of that. Like, you can have the conversations and, hey, so what's your ultimate goal? I think if you stopping there, just like how we teach sales teams how to do proper discovery, if you're not asking enough questions, you're not going to get to the root of what's really happening. So I think as long as you kind of take that advice that we probably dole out on a daily basis and use it for yourself and continue to ask those questions, like, great, so the goal is for this, but like, how do you envision us getting there? What happens if we don't get there? What happens if we do get there? What roadblocks do you see along the way? So I think as long as you can continue layering that and having the conversation to it, you will get to like what that core goal is, right? Like, and the old analogy is like, you have someone that's like, oh, we need better onboarding because our sales teams aren't hitting attainment. So I feel like they're not onboarded right. And as you start peeling back the layers, it's like, well, no one's doing good discovery, or you know what I mean? Or a sales leader says, hey, we need to learn to negotiate better because we're discounting too much. And it's, well, we're also not getting to the pain or the impact and selling on value. So if I would say you can't just take the goal at face value, obviously continue to do your due diligence and continue that conversation to really understand the drivers behind that high level goal.
That's great.
Hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah. I think so. We have more questions. How much time do you spend on alignment meetings versus getting stuff done? Yes, good question. So not as much time as you would think. There's probably, if you're either new to an org or new to a role, there's probably a lot more of that at the beginning while you're trying to like wrap your arms around everything and meeting with everyone. I tend to try to space them out. Like, I'll meet with a couple of people this week, a couple of people next week. But then once you get that going, you can kind of start to have them on a normal basis where they're not just, I don't meet every week by any means. But there are, other hey, I'm part of our go-to-market meeting. I'm part of, this meeting with product and things like that. So I'm able to get that alignment and understand what's going on in those areas without having to just meet individually with everyone. So I don't have like a hard number. I meet X amount of hours a day. There is a fine line, right? Like, you got to kind of get what you need, and cool, I'm going to take this and I'm going to go do something with it. If you feel like you're just getting, having these meetings back to back to back, you would probably have to pull yourself back some. I would say it's probably, if I had to guess, like 30% kind of meeting and aligning with these folks, 70% going and either getting it done or like building the strategy and what we need to get it done, right? Yeah. Now there's tons of collaboration along the way, and that 70% does include that. Like, hey, we're going to go collaborate on this thing that we're building, right? But I think that's different than the strategic conversations. For sure. Okay, question from Terry. What's the best percentage of enablement to sales size? Enablement to sales size. Yeah. I've heard this asked a lot, and I've heard it answered in a few different ways. I've heard like, once you get to 50 people, you probably need to add another person or two. I currently support, I'm Revenue Enablement, so I support all of our customer facing teams, so CSMs as well as our support team. So I have between 40 and 50. It's still manageable for me right now. Thankfully, we don't have a ton of headcount this year. Otherwise, we probably would have to, look at bringing at least some or pulling someone from somewhere to kind of help just with some of the more tactical things. But I think once you get to 50, it's probably time to start exploring having a second person. Yeah. Okay, great. All right. And then one more question about stakeholders. How do you help stakeholders to prioritize and then ask why they want it? So help stakeholders to prioritize like what it is that they want. I believe that's the intention of this question. Yeah. So I don't have it here. Happy to share it afterwards, but I do have a enablement prioritization model that ties into this. And
to that question specifically. And a lot of it is just the questions of like, does this impact revenue?
Yeah. Yeah. Trip added on. Yeah. Focus. I think focusing on the priorities.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
if
So I
you're,
think being that sometimes you just have to, and depending on who your stakeholders are, sometimes our executives are very, very strategic and are very, high level, and they're thinking of things that maybe aren't like as grounded as some of us that are like boots on the ground are. And so you just got to sometimes be their touchstone. And like, sometimes that question, like, yeah, that's a great idea. How is this impacting revenue? Right.
Yeah.
Sometimes just that question alone is enough to like it come down a notch.
Yep.
And then, yeah, there's a few other questions that are part of that prioritization model. That's always like the biggest one. Another one is like, well, if we didn't implement this, how would that impact us? Does it negatively impact revenue? Are we going to lose customers? Because sometimes you can de-escalate things that way as well and just understand the importance.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So Scott said the 4 W's. What do you want? Why do you want it? What's the anticipated response? What's in it for you? That's
absolutely.
Thank you, Scott.
Love it.
And then Jay made a very good point. You can map the priority to Eli's maturity model.
That too. Yeah, and we'll touch on a maturity model a little further in the slides too, a little bit.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
We've got one more question, and maybe we'll
sure.
touch on this later. So
yeah,
if you want to punt it, we can. What percentage of your time do you spend on collaboration between product, sales, and field support? This person works for a rapidly scaling startup.
Product, sales. I mean, I spend the majority of my time collaborating with products and sales,
Yeah.
product sales and marketing and product marketing.
Yeah.
That's where a majority of my time gets spent. And we will get into that and how that and how you kind of make time for all the things you got to do. So, so number 2, if you haven't established an enablement charter, this is a easy way to say, hey, here's what I'm going to focus on, and here's what I'm going to do, and who I'm going to work with, and here's what's not on my list of things, right? So it's, I'm sure a lot of you have seen tons of content out about, establishing a charter. I'm not going to go through how to establish a charter. There's a ton of that out there. Just like, hey, the things you want to define, your objective, your scope, who's your target audience, what are the goals, how are you going to be measured? That is very important. And the goals of it is, secure buy-in, right? Consensus across those teams, across those stakeholders, establish parameters, outline your success, manage expectations, especially as a team of one, like be real about, hey, what you can do as a single person, and mainly create that foundation. I had a hard time at first, like with this, when I was, building a charter, because, we are also a startup in high growth mode. And it's like, gosh, by the time this thing is done, everything changes. So priorities have shifted. We're doing something different. So I had to like, okay, it's just a document. It's a dynamic document. And I just kind of think of it, it's the guiding principle, or like, this is my North Star. So if you do start getting all these other requests, you can go back and go, okay, well, here's the focus. If we're shifting priorities, we can make changes to the charter, but I feel like it needs a lot more like, why are we doing this? What is it impacting to make those changes? Versus just like trying to do all this like side quests on the fly, like use this as your North Star. And side quests are like my jam. So I really have to like pull myself back to like what I need to focus on. That's an ADHD thing though. So so establishing the charter is just one of those, be strategic, establish the charter so you can say, hey, here's what I'm working on and what my focus is going to be, because you will get pulled in a lot of different directions when you're just one person.
Yeah, I believe we have a blog post on this as well, how to create
a charter. Yes,
that's what I share after the webinar. Terry says charter will also help you from being an order taker more. So I think if I'm understanding it will get you out of that constantly being an order.
So don't just make the charter, you got to share the charter too. Make sure everyone else sees the charter so they know what your role is and like what your scope is and what you're doing, right? Because that helps a lot too with that. Because there's sometimes just not everyone knows what enablement is, especially if you're at a smaller startup that finally grew to bring in enablement, and people are like, I don't this person does something with sales. I don't know exactly. Do I come to them with this? Do I go to them with that? So for myself, I share it with those stakeholders and the people that kind of help to shape it first, get the like, we're good, okay. And then it's up, anyone in the company can go look at it if they ever are like, I'm not quite sure what this person's doing.
So I'm glad that you mentioned this, because we actually got a question from Chris, which is, what strategies have you seen to be successful to convince executive management to create an enablement function? And I believe you were the first one in enablement.
I was. We didn't
right?
Yeah, we didn't have enablement here. And I think that I don't have like a silver bullet answer for that. My SVP of sales here is very pro enablement, which is awesome. So he knew it was something we needed. We also have historically had a more junior or younger team here. So there was absolutely a need outside of just managers trying to do their own forms of enablement. But really what we just grew to a point that it's like, okay, there's enough people now that this really needs to happen. So I think as far as like convincing a company that doesn't have it, I think just looking at, hey, what's the size of the team? What's the structure of the team? How much time are managers actually able to spend with their team, right? Versus like in the weeds on everything else. And then, putting that forth and I think you would just have to make the business case for it, right? And then what can enablement impact, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you remember when enablement was established, how many people were on the team?
Probably. Yeah. So there was about 20, or somewhere between 15 to 20 sellers at the time.
Right.
And then, when I started with enablement here, I was just sales enablement. I've recently taken over on revenue enablement. So I'm actually working with our CSMs and our support team. So all the customer facing functions.
Great.
So yeah, so it started smaller and then kind of grew.
Okay, cool.
Cool.
One more question.
Sure, sorry.
Quick. So what key business metrics, leading and lagging indicators are you focused on impacting?
Yeah, great question. And there's a few of them. I mean, the lagging indicators, I don't focus so much on. I see them all the time, right? But there's not, at that point, it's kind of too late and did we do anything? So as far as those leading indicators that I'm looking at, the first thing, it's especially right now with where we're at as a business, we're really, really focused on all things pipe create right now. So whether it's with my SDR or ADR teams, that's going to be a lot more activity based. Are we getting the activities out there? What are those conversations look like? Are our dials converting to demos and things of that nature? With our AE teams, that's going to be more, hey, how many customer meetings are they having? How much time are they spending on sales activities? What's that sales productivity and efficiency look like? Do they have the stuff that they need, and stuff like that, right? And then that, once we can kind of get that, we'll get down to like win rates and how many, as what deals are moving from stage 1 to stage 2 and how fast is that happening? So a lot of those. And then for our CSM teams now, that I'm supporting them, that's how many customers are we having those QBRs with, right? What do those meetings look like? Their ultimate goal is obviously retention. So it's like, how many of the customers in our book of business are at some risk, and what does the activities look like that we're reaching out to them and getting in touch with those? So a lot of it is fairly activity based, with like the pipeline and stuff like that. And then leaning in even further and like, where are the things that we can influence? Like I can get really granular in the data sometimes. So for example, we have an outbound, we call them ADRs, our account development reps. There's our outbound sales development team essentially. And I actually look at the metrics of the cold call, how many dials, and when we connected, did we get past the intro? If they hung up at the intro, but that we mark it as that. did we get to pitch, like, or do our elevator pitch? If not, did we get to questions or objections? Like, where in the call did we lose them? Because now I can go and say, hey, we really need to work on our intro, or hey, let's retool the pitch, right? You can just start to get really granular on those little things instead of, hey, we need to do better cold calls.
Yeah, that's great. Awesome.
Sorry, I could have probably gone on about that forever.
You know your
Okay,
stuff.
I know. Thank you. Thank you. So the spoiler alert, solo enablement is anything but solo. It's a team sport. Please don't try to do it yourself. And I say this because I learned that the hard way. Like, oh my gosh, I'm going to do all this stuff and I have all this stuff to do. And I'm working till midnight and I'm like looking at my husband like, who are you? I don't even recognize you anymore because I've been buried in a computer for 72 days. And then you find out that that deck that you spent 3 hours on was something that product marketing had built a version of 6 months ago that you just didn't know it existed. So don't try to do it yourself, for sure. It is very much a team sport. Even though you're a team of one, you're going to work across all these other teams, and they all just need to be kind of part of your team, unofficially, right? So do that by bridging the gap, right? Working with those collaboration teams, your product marketing, operations teams, for content. And I even have mine do recorded or hosted sessions sometimes. I have our Salesforce admin on our sales ops teams who has discovered that he absolutely loves recording like little training videos, like little 2-3 minute, like, here's how you do this. And so he just does them all the time now. Like, I'll be like, hey, do you mind if jumping on this call and time about this? He's like, oh, I already have a video for that. And like, he'll send it over to me, and it's amazing. It's great. And it's that perfect little like bite-sized content that we want, right? And then, having either, product marketing or your operations teams actually like join some of if you're doing live sessions or recorded sessions, so on and so forth. They're surprisingly really great at it. They're talking about something that they built a lot of times. So there's a lot of passion there. And it can get your teams a little bit more excited than maybe someone who isn't so close to it. And like, truth be told, when they come to you and go, hey, sales just isn't getting this, you're like, well, I don't know what to tell you because you're the one that taught it to them. Kidding. No, but it's a really great trade-off, and they tend to really enjoy having that interaction, especially like product loves to get in front of sales. So lean on that for sure. Leveraging the subject matter experts. So, you will have to delegate to people, and sometimes you're going to delegate to people that are a higher level than you. But so don't be afraid to do that. And again, use them as well for content and training and more importantly, feedback, right? Hey, this is how we're pitching this. So for example, we did a certification through SalesHood on a new product launch that we had earlier in Q1, and all of the reps had to record themselves in our product demoing this. I could go and grade all those. I'm not the subject matter expert though. So I actually had one person from product and one person from our solution consultant team, who is the kind of the liaison SME on that. I added them in there as the graders or the coaches on all of those pitches. So, and they were like so excited to get to go in and listen to how sales is like demoing this thing that they built. And then they got to give all the feedback, like, oh, you could do this here or do that there. And it was a really great way to get them involved and not have to watch 27 videos of the same demo myself. Right. And then super important, leaning on your managers. So your frontline managers, I mean, they're going to play one of the biggest roles when it comes to adoption of your program. So making sure that they're on board, that they're coaching their teams, that things are getting done. And the best way that I've done that is asking them, not just for the support, but collaborating with them in how to best implement those programs for their teams, right? Understand, like, let's not throw this out at the end of the quarter, right? Let's when would this be good? Like, where we can kind of get their attention, how's the feedback from your team, and things like that.
So most importantly, fifth thing to make you thrive, and to me the most important, is building trust and relationships, right? And how do we do that in a professional setting and when we're working across so many different teams. To me, it's about just being true to yourself and being very honest in your approach, being genuinely yourself, right? Take responsibility for things that don't work, right? If something didn't work the way that you wanted it to, you didn't get the results you wanted, like you gotta own it. Yeah. And hey, what did we learn? How are we going to make the changes, right? And a really cool example of that happened not too long ago, actually. I send out quarterly executive impact emails like, hey, here's the things Enablement's been doing. Here's the things that we've seen an impact in. And it's usually like tons of amazing and positive stuff. And it's so great. And it makes Enablement look amazing. And I was sending out one in January that was for Q4. But since it was Q4, we're on a calendar year. So it included a lot of like year-end stuff in it. And I was actually meeting with our COO because they were working on board slides too. So they had a lot of these metrics. And I wanted to make sure that the numbers I was using were right? Like we're pulling them from the same place. Are we looking at them? Am I using the same thing? And so I was kind of just going over the metrics with her. And then I said, well, actually, hey, I would love to you want to give me feedback on this impact email? I've sent out a few of these, and I get a few responses here and there. And she reads through it and she's like, can I be honest? And I was like, please, I think, ? She's like, this is really great. And I like, hey, we're doing good things. Win rates went up, conversions went up. Like that's awesome. But it all just sounds really rah. And I was like, oh, okay. She's like, it's good to hear. But like, if I just get quarter after quarter of like rah emails about this, I'm probably going to stop reading them. Like, I would really love to hear, what did you do that didn't work? And what did you learn? And what are you going to do differently? And I was like, oh, yeah, I guess I didn't want to put my failures in an email to my exec team, right? But I did it. And literally I got 5x the actual like response to that email that I had on any of the ones that I sent before. Like, oh my gosh, that's so cool that you learned that and made a pivot. Like, I think just owning things and like just being true about it can go a really long way than just like, we did this and it was amazing, and I did this and it was amazing, right? And another piece of that is keeping an open dialogue and giving people an opportunity to contribute, and being part of that, either shaping your strategy, helping you deliver your strategy, and then, the open dialogue back from the teams you're delivering it to, right? Like, I want those teams to be able to feel like they can be like, yeah, that training, didn't love it. Like, cool. What did you love about it? How can we make it better? Like, you're not calling my baby ugly. Like, it's not going to hurt my feelings. Like, I really want to know how this is going to help you. So I think if you keep that dialogue open, let them contribute and feel like they're part of shaping it too, that helps build that trust and relationship. And then keeping your promises, right? And being upfront if you do have to change things. Like, hey, I promised I was going to deliver this. These 5 other things changed though, and now I have to pivot and we're going to do this. But I think as long as you're upfront and do the things you say you're going to do, and if you're not going to do them, communicate that as early on as possible, and being transparent about those changes goes a long way too. I've been very fortunate so I report to SVP of sales here, and we have a really great relationship. We're both very open and honest. And we have some really good conversations, but we can have those tough conversations, and sometimes not everyone feels like they can have those. But I think if you go into it, just being genuine, being real, that people are more willing to kind of meet you there, and then you can hash out those things that maybe people don't talk about, and then that's like fester, and suddenly you're like, I don't know why this person feels like they hate me. But like being able to have those conversations and get things done, right? So I always think, hey, being strategic and impactful is going to get you a seat at the table. That's what Enablement wants, right? We want a seat at the table. But building those relationships and trust is what's going to ultimately keep you there.
Yeah. You have a lot of comments. Yes to all of this. Love this. Carrie said, my enablement director is the king of raw emails, and he really needs to hear this story.
You can send him the recording, just fast forward past the IT issue.
Yes. I'm sorry, everyone, about that. But
Can
the
we edit
message
this before we
Yeah.
send it?
But the message is great. And, to take the time to talk about what went wrong and what you learned from it and open up a dialogue that everyone can participate in, like you said, it all goes back to the fact that you're not just a team of one.
Yeah.
It's a team sport, and everyone needs to be able to have input and understand what's going on. And, we all make mistakes every day, and we learn from them. That's where you learn.
Yeah. Another really interesting thing that we just do here as a company, it's like kind of part of the company culture. Like if you're going to kind of go onto a meeting with like a broader audience and like talk about something that like isn't working, that specifically other people were involved in, you have to have had that conversation with them first. Mm-hmm. Like, hey, demand gen, hey, marketing, hey, product, like this isn't working. How can we fix it? Like, you can't just go on a go-to-market or like an EOPS meeting and be like, so I was working with this person on this, and then this isn't working and that. And I've actually been on meetings where the CEO goes, hold on, is this the first time you guys are talking about it? And they go, yeah. He goes, great, we're going to end this meeting and we will continue after you guys have talked about this separately and not in the audience of the rest of the team. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like, that's how you build that trust, right? Where you're not going to get on a call and feel like someone threw you under the bus. So then you're like, I didn't even know this was coming. I was totally blindsided. But if you have those conversations first and you go, okay, no, you're right. Yes, we do need to fix this. And then you can go in as a united front to the broader audience and go, hey, this isn't working. And this is how we've collaborated on what we should fix and how to attack this.
Yeah. Cheryl says, it sounds like your leadership team is fantastic.
Oh, thanks. They're pretty great. They're pretty amazing. I can't complain. I haven't always had that, so they're pretty amazing.
Trip is asking, when would you add another enablement person to your team? I feel you're kind of on the cusp, right?
I am on the cusp, but like other folks, the economy is what it is, right? Yeah. So we're as a company just trying to be lean where we can, just because there's a lot of unknowns, right? It's not like, oh, we're struggling, but like we don't know what's coming, right? And we don't want to have to go through layoffs. And I've had this conversation with people about being a team of one, that they're like, yeah, I was a team of 15 and we got ripped, and now I'm a team of one, and now there's a ton of things I don't know what to do. So we don't want to have to do that. So for now, it's not in the cards for this year, but we're not massively growing this year either, unless something drastically changes in the economy and then we're suddenly like, okay, we feel comfortable to continue on the spend path. So maybe in 2024. Yeah.
It's smart. A lot of companies are being cautious.
Yes. Right? Yeah. So key takeaways. So the 5 things, right? Be strategic. Think strategic engagement. Establish a charter, right? That's your North Star. Don't go it alone. Collaborate across your org. Solo enablement, anything but solo. Always be thinking of maximizing and scaling. You may have 10 sellers right now, but in 2 years you may have 100. So think of, hey, how can I scale this thing that I spent hours building, right? You may have to reiterate it a bit, but if you build it in that way to begin with, it'll be helpful to you in the long run. And then most important, building trust and relationships. I think that one speaks for itself.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Bobbi Jo. If anyone has one last question, feel free to put it in the chat right now. Otherwise, this has been very insightful, very inspiring, hugely helpful. Thank you to the audience for being so patient during a couple of struggles with technology. We know that they happen and that you're understanding. And Bobbi Jo, thank you for being here.
I'm just like, I did this in the office because I'm like, I'm going to make sure that this doesn't happen to me. And then it's like, what is going on? So I do appreciate everyone's patience. Big time, super appreciate it. If anyone, I'll make sure the deck gets sent out. I talked about that prioritization model. Hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm happy to share anything I've got.
Okay, awesome. And we will follow up with the recording and the slides. blog post that talks about building a charter, and feel free to reach out if we at SalesHood can do anything else to help you in your journey, your sales enablement journey.